Alright, so in today's video, we're going to be talking about roots of perfect squares and cubes. So the first thing we need to do is remember what a perfect square is and what a perfect cube is. So remember, a perfect square is the number that results when you multiply an integer by itself 2 times. So if I had 2 squared, we know that's the same thing as 2 times 2, which is just 4. So 4 is my perfect square. Okay. We know that if I took -3 squared, that's the same thing as -3 times -3, which is +9. So 9 is my perfect square. Okay, so we need to be careful there. 4 is a perfect square because 2 times 2 is 4. 9 is a perfect square because 3 times 3 is 9. Remember that a perfect cube is the number that results when we multiply a number by itself 3 times. So in this case, 2 cubed is the same thing as 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8. So 8 is a perfect cube. Another example would be -3 cubed, which is the same thing as -27. Remember yesterday we talked about the fact that cubes can be negative, whereas squares cannot. So other examples of perfect squares. Would be 16 is a perfect square. 25 is a perfect square because 5 times 5. 36 because 6 times 6. 144 because 12 times 12. So all of these are perfect squares because I can take a number and multiply it by itself and get this number in the box. In blue are other perfect cubes. 1 is a perfect cube. 125 is a perfect cube because 5 times 5 times 5 is 125. 64 is a perfect cube because 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. All right. So just be careful. They do overlap a little bit, but red is my perfect squares and blue are some perfect cubes. So that's from the previous lesson. However, we're going to be talking about square roots and cube roots. So we need to know what that means. Well, a square root looks like this. It's like a division symbol with a check mark. And you'll see a number inside, and we'll start with an easy one. Okay? So we have the square root of 4. And inside this is a perfect square. We know 4 is a perfect square. Since 4 is a perfect square, this is asking you what number times itself equals 4. So the square root of 4 is equal to 2. Let's think about where I got this from. Where did I get this from? I know this because 2 squared equals 4. If this number is my perfect square, then this number right here is the square root. Okay. So if I were to ask you the square root of 16, you should be able to use that list from the other day and figure out that the answer is 4. Because 4 squared is 16. 16 is my perfect square, which means 4 is the root. So the square root is kind of doing the opposite. where instead of starting with the root and figuring out what the perfect square is, you're starting with the perfect square and going backwards, okay? For today, we're only going to deal with perfect squares, all right? I don't want you to have any decimal answer. So let's do some more roots of perfect squares. If I were to take the square root of 1, another way I could write it is the square root, right? The 2 root, the square root of 1. That equals 1 because 1 squared equals 1. The square root of 9 is 3 because 3 squared is 9. But remember, it could be positive or negative 3. The square root of 25 is 5 because 5 squared is 25. So notice these numbers are coming from that list that we did for our assignment the other day. To figure out the root, I am taking the square root of 25. I look at this idea of what number did I multiply by itself to get 25. So maybe you can come up with another one. Maybe I ask, what is the square root of 169? If you said 13, awesome, because 13 squared, or 13 times itself, is 169. So notice, again, I'm using that list from the class the other day to tell me what the answer is. The square root is just saying, okay, what number did I multiply by itself to get this perfect square? So that is what you need to ask yourself. What number did I multiply by itself to get this perfect square? Okay? To place some roots on the number line. So I might ask you to place, for example, the square root of 16, the negative square root of 9, and the square root of 25. And I will give you the number line already filled out usually, but for this class today, I didn't fill it in, and that's okay. So I need to place these on the number line. And to do that, I need to figure out what it is equal to, or what it is the same as. So if I think about it, what do I multiply by itself to get 16? If you said 4, awesome. We know that 4 squared is 16. So this is the same thing as 4. So I can put a dot right here and say that this is the same thing as the square root of 16. The square root of 9, I have to ask myself, what do I multiply by itself to get 9? So go ahead and try to figure that out. If you said 3, you are correct, because 3 squared is 9. But remember, there's this negative here. So this is not just positive 3, it's asking me to place it at negative 3. And it looks like Miss Satri dropped her negatives over here, which is not great. This should say negative 3 and negative 4. And the same thing here, I want to know what the equivalent, or what is the same as the square root of 25. So I have to ask myself, what times itself is 25? If you said 5, awesome. 5 times 5 is 25. So this is the same thing as 5. And we know it's positive because there's no negative out in front. Again, the important thing is you look at the root and you ask yourself, what do I have to multiply by itself to get this number? What do I multiply by itself to get this number? Not only are we dealing with square roots, we're also going to be dealing with cube roots. Cube roots are going to look a little different. Instead of the 2 on the outside, or just drawing this check mark, right? It's going to have a 3. That's how you know it's a cube root. This 3 right here tells me I'm taking a cube root. That tells us to take the cube root. So if I were to ask you to take the cube root of 8, What question do you think you have to ask yourself? Good. I hope you said you ask yourself the question, what number do I multiply by itself 3 times? So we're asked the cube root of 8, and we need to figure out what the cube root of 8 is. So we ask ourselves, what number do I multiply by itself 3 times to get 8? We actually have a list that shows us what number I multiplied. This is 2, because 2 cubed is equal to 8. Remember, it's the same idea as a square root. This number is going to be my root, while this number is the perfect cube. This number is called the exponent, and it just tells me how many times I'm multiplying. So the number that it equals is the perfect cube. The number with the exponent is called the root. So we know if I'm asked what the cube root of 8 is, it's going to be this number that I multiplied by itself 3 times. So if I ask us, what is the cube root of 64? We would look at our list, or we would guess and check, and we discover that it's actually 4, because 4 cubed is 64. Remembering that this number right here is our root to the perfect cube. So what is a cube root? It's asking you what number did you have to multiply by itself 3 times to get this perfect cube. So let's do some more roots of perfect cubes. The cube root, and notice every time I have to write that 3. In this case, I have to write the 3 so that we know we're taking a cube root. The cube root of 125 is the same thing as 5, because 5 cubed is 125. We'll do the cube root of 1,000. And if you look at your list, it will be there. And this is 10, because 10 cubed is 1,000. And let's do another one. The cube root of 512 is 8, because 8 cubed is 512. Now, do I just know these off the top of my head? Yes, Miss Satry does. Miss Satry does, because she's worked with math for a very long time. However, I don't expect you to have these memorized quite yet. I do want you to start memorizing them, but you won't have them memorized quite yet. So that's why that list is going to come in handy. If not, you can guess and check. You can try 2 times 2 times 2. It doesn't work. Move on. 3 times 3 times 3. It doesn't work. Move on. 4 times 4 times 4. It doesn't work. Move on. Okay, you can try that guess and check routine to help you as well. Just remember that if you're using the list, this number right here is the root. This is the root. And these numbers are the perfect cubes. And just like we did with perfect squares, we need to be able to place them on number lines. So again, I'm going to draw this, and I will be giving you number lines that are filled in. I might ask you the cube root of 1. I might go with the cube root of negative 64 and the cube root of 216. Cube root means I have to put that 3 there. So we're going to place these on the number lines by first figuring out what they're equivalent to, or what they are the same as. So using my list, or guessing and checking, right? 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. So the cube root of 1 is 1. So I can place this right here. And I'm going to make sure that I label it appropriately. I'm asked what the cube root of negative 64 is. So that should automatically tell you I have to be taking the cube of a negative number. Automatically, we should know that. And then I have to do either use my list or guess and check. And I'm going to try the guess and check method. 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. So that doesn't work. 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. That doesn't work. 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. That works. So the cube root of 64 is 4. The cube root of negative 64 is negative 4. So I know that I need to place this at negative 4 because that is the root of this perfect cube. All right, and then the last one that I need to do is the cube root of 216. You either use your list or guess and check. We left off with 4, so I'm going to keep my guess and check. We know that 5 times 5 times 5 is 125. 6 times 6 times 6 is 216. So 6 cubed is 216. So I know my answer has to be 6. I know that these are equivalent. They're the same as each other. So I can place this one right there on my number line. All right. So you'll be asked to do problems like this as well. So to summarize what we talked about, when I'm given a problem like this, 2 to the third power is 8. We need to remember that this number right here is my root, right? Just like if I'm given 3 squared is 9. This number right here is my root. And then this number on the other side of the equal sign is my perfect square or cube. And the top one, it's a cube because I multiplied it by itself 3 times. This one is a perfect square because I multiplied it twice. So if I were to go the reverse order, where I say what is the cube root of 8, it's going to be that number in green because that's what the root is. The root is the number that I multiplied by itself to get my perfect square or cube. The number that I multiply by itself to get that perfect square or cube is my root. Okay? So that's the important thing that we needed to know for today. And I will see you for class, and yeah, I hope you understood it.